Isabel Webster is and has the very latest on the developments and the movement of the great and the good as this important day unfolds, Isabel.
Yes, lots of movement, not just in terms of events, but in terms of people. Just in the time that I've been here, the crowds have probably doubled, I would say. There's a sort of atmosphere of sort of quiet sadness, a heaviness in the air, particularly the closer you get to the gates of the palace. People very quiet in hushed tones, lots of people carrying flowers and laying them at the gates there. And look, lots of people have never known anything but Her Majesty the Queen as their monarch, and for them this feels like a personal loss, like a death within the family, and wanting to be here amongst other mourners, other citizens, and to pay their respects to somebody who spent 70 years in a life of service. But look, the atmosphere, Alistair, could not be further from the atmosphere you and I experienced just 14 weeks ago outside this very palace. You'll remember, of course, we were all gathered for Trooping the Colour, and Her Majesty the Queen, a tiny little dot, appearing on that famous balcony there. The last time she will ever have appeared on that balcony. Really sad to reflect on how time has progressed in the last 14 weeks. But over the period of her reign, that balcony, of course, has been so historic, hasn't it? We've seen her there for royal weddings between Kate and William and many others, and indeed for sad occasions. And of course it continues to be an absolute key for grieving today. And I look back and think about the times that Her Majesty actually left the palace herself, perhaps after World War II. We know that she had one of the most memorable nights of her life when she came out and mixed with the crowds here as a young princess, didn't she, Alistair? And she was then trying to soak up the atmosphere of having successfully defeated the Nazis. But also perhaps the most noteworthy was when she broke with royal protocol, royal tradition, 25 years ago, following the death of her former daughter-in-law, Princess Diana. There were calls for her to do more, to come and be amongst the crowd, and she did just that. She shook hands, she spoke to people, and that was the birth, really, of the royal walkabout, something that we've all become quite used to, and we might well see again today. But there are quiet echoes, Alistair, today of Princess Diana's death. It's not just in the sense of shock and sorrow in the community, but also people bringing those flowers, because wasn't it so iconic in the aftermath of her death, people all bringing flowers to the gates of the palace. I'm told that the flowers here will be cleared every 12 hours, not in an act of callousness. All of them will be saved, but just purely to make way for the next tranche of flowers, which will inevitably come.
I'm going to just add something to that, because you're so absolutely right about the significance of that balcony and the fact that the late Queen pulled her ATS cap down over her eyes and went out and mingled with the crowd. But the late Queen stood on that balcony with her father and her mother and Winston Churchill on the day democracy and the West overcame fascism and the Nazis in Germany. And it was just 5 years later when that same Winston Churchill, thrown out by the British electorate perfectly reasonably in 1945, then came back as her first Prime Minister. That strange little balcony sums up a vital moment in British history. And she was there. She saw it all.
She was. Yes, absolutely, and echoes, I suppose, of today. We know Winston Churchill was in power twice, something people speculate about whether or not Boris Johnson will do that. But of course, just 3 days ago, Boris Johnson was with Her Majesty in Balmoral, and then of course our new Prime Minister Liz Truss was given permission by the late Queen to form her government. We understand now that King Charles III is going to make his way from Balmoral very shortly and will be travelling down to Buckingham Palace here, and he will then be meeting with the new Prime Minister. For Liz Truss, 2 monarchs in just 1 week. What a historic week this has been, not just for her, but for Britain as well.